Welcome to the Would You Like a Cup of Tea podcast in connection with the event Would You Like a Cup of Tea, which is all about dismantling prejudice and helping to form healing and human connections within our hearts and minds by creating a safe space for diverse voices to be heard. The project is dedicated to fostering empathy and social change through sharing lived experiences, creating a connection with authenticity amongst others, and more importantly within ourselves. You will hear a variety of live podcasts that have taken place on the night, as well as from others who have come to share their stories at a later date, whilst also sharing their thoughts around the event. I hope you enjoy. Thanks for listening. Welcome to the Would You Like a Cup of Tea podcast. Can you tell us your name and a bit about yourself?
Yes, certainly. Yes, good evening again, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jeff Hinds, and I'm from Reading, Berkshire. I was bred and born here. A member of the first generation of the Windrush generation.
And how does that feel?
Very proud. Very, very proud indeed. Very proud of those early settlers. I'm very proud of my generation. I'm proud of the next generation. I'm proud of the next generation. I'm proud of everybody who do good things.
So can you tell us why you're proud? Because that's not usually a word that we associate with the season of the Windrush.
Well, if you know where my parents came from the island of Barbados in the Caribbean, and they came here to Reading. Well, they actually settled in Croydon, South London. So I almost was a Londoner. And God saved me, because if I was a Londoner, I might already been shot for my views. So anyway, my father had reason to come to Reading in 1958 to some type of event. I think it was a christening or something like that. And when he came to Reading, he found that a lot of the West Indians he met here in Reading came from the same area in Barbados to my mother. And Barbados is a tiny place. So he went back to Croydon and said to my mother, look, I went to Reading and I saw lots of people from your area. We might as well move to Reading. So they came to Reading in 1958. My older brother was born in Reading, then I was born in Reading, and then my last brother was born in Reading, and then my two siblings that were born in Barbados came to Reading in 1960 and 67, and we were all under one roof, say about 15, 18 years after my parents were married. So I'm proud of that.
Yeah. And how was that? Like,
sorry, I didn't actually try to point about the pride.
Yes.
The national motto of Barbados is industry and pride. But I only knew that years after. I always pay attention to pride, because there's something about pride in Caribbean life, and you're taught from early o'clock to never bring disgrace or shame on your family. Right? So that's what kept me a good boy. Nothing else. That kept me a good boy. I had many bad thoughts, but because of that, I kept it.
Right, so that brings me to what I was going to say to you. So how was that for you, sharing a house with siblings that you didn't grow up with, really?
I'm glad you asked me that. I'm so glad, because I want to tell this story. I really want to tell this story, because this story is not unique to me. Many people here would have had this experience. Because in those days now, right, at the time we was cool about it, but when you look back at it now, children in those days were largely kept in the dark. There's certain conversations you couldn't get involved with. If somebody came around your house, you were told in no uncertain terms, you do not interject in the conversation, and you make yourself scarce, because it is the people's talk. Now, sometime, I was probably about 4 or 5 years at the time of age, and we were told, we're going to the airport. Oh, we're going to the airport. Ooh, we're going to the airport. Now, we don't know what airport is mean. We don't know what it means really, but we just decipher that it's a place where planes come. Anyway, so we now know, myself and the first brother was born here, the youngest fellow was only a baby. So we now know we're going to the airport on Saturday. But we don't know why. Anyway, my recollection of the journey there is not really there. I don't remember taking ages to get there because in those days, that was before the M4. So it would have taken a long time to get there. All I can remember really is that it was dark when we left in the morning. So we went down to what was called the London airport in those days. And I remember standing in a crowd of lots of people was there. And I decided to take a peek around the place. And I gone to a side someplace, and when I turn around, I can't see my mom and dad. I can't see my uncle who drove the car. And I don't know where I am. In the middle of all these people, and I'm lost in the airport. And I cry my eyes out, And I remember a lady. I say elderly lady because I remember she was older. She was probably in her 20s, but to me she was old, And somehow she bring me back up to. She reunited me with my family. So now we went, man. We were looking for you, this type of thing. Anyway, so we're back in order now. And we're standing there now again. Me and my brother don't know what we're standing for. We don't know why we're there. All we know is that we're at the airport. So then my father leaves us there, and walks about as far as the windows down there with the other room outside there. And we stay there. And then about 5 or so minutes later, he comes back with this young girl next to him. And we just say, oh, by the way, this is your sister. And that is how we met our sister. And we knew we had a sister and a brother. And we had one little photograph of them two together. So that is how I met my sister the first time. And then 6 months later, we repeated the same thing again. And with my brother that came then. So after my parents were married in 1952. And by 1967, all 5 of us were all in the same house at Salisbury Road in Reading. And that is a story that is, I feel proud of it now. And many families have that story to tell. But it created a feeling within us of some intrigue. There was some cautiousness as well, because my sister and my brother, who came from Barbados, were different to us three here. They knew certain things that we didn't know. They're older, of course. But they also had to learn the ropes in the UK. And we were very young at the time, so we couldn't really teach them anything much. So they ended up teaching us things. And one of the things that they taught us was cultural behavior, and they underpinned the early start that our parents had given us in cultural behavior and respect for the home, and to never bring shame and disgrace on your family.
So were those differences shown during your time in education?
Education is a very interesting thing to look back at, because history will show, right? We don't talk about it now. We talk about the Windrush generation now, and we only speak about the Windrush generation because of the scandal that happened in 2018. How sad is that? Yeah. We only speak about the Windrush generation because of the ill treatment they received. Now, us, the first generation to be born here in the UK, I think history will write our story, and if they're accurate, and if it is given due respect and due regard for what we had to do and go through, I think it will be a story of triumph. Because we had to live 2 lives. In many ways, I would say, in a strange type of way, we had to be bilingual. Because when you close your door on a Friday after school, you are 100% Caribbean indoors. The food, the music, the talk, the visits. And by the time Monday come along, and it's Monday morning, you're going off to school now, you got to put some of that out of your mind and come and interact with a totally different culture. And you do it without any inhibitions, and you do it with confidence. But when you look back at it now, all those years later, some people struggled with it. And some people then create a bit of an identity crisis. Now, I live to see some of the boys that particularly boys, I can't really speak too much about the girls really, but the boys that I met, that I knew at school. Certainly when we went to secondary school then, we could almost tell who had been, let's say, treated by their parents with dignity in their culture, and those who have been discouraged from their culture by their parents because of fear that they're going to get blackballed, as they say. You could almost tell by the approach to you and the way in which they communicate with you, and the fact that they might turn and say to you, "How come you speak like that?" Because they don't, and they was not encouraged to keep up the patois.
Do you think that things would have been better, like in terms of society, a lot sooner if that fear hadn't have been there?
I'm not sure, because it takes many sorts of people to handle different situations in their own way, right? Everybody got their own way of handling things, right? I personally was always a very confident child. No, let me rephrase that. I was a very quiet child, very, very quiet. My younger brother and the brother above me, my mother told me this as I got older, that I would sit on the chair and keep quiet, and these two taking the house down, having fun, and I sit there and just watch and don't say a word. But then at some point in time, you come out to yourself sometimes, And I can't remember ever feeling uncomfortable at home or feeling in any way inferior or different to any of my siblings. I've never felt it, right? But I do appreciate that some people do handle situations differently. But I felt that having that strong cultural background, I always see it as a source of comfort and something to lean on.
Okay, that's good. So, do you feel like, or do you know, like, I don't know how open your parents were with you, do they have any regrets for coming here?
Well, my father expressed no regrets. My mother never expressed regrets as such, but she told us some things that they had to endure here, right? But they never tell us much. For example, I went to work for a motor company called Ford's in 1980 at the age of about 17 or 18. It is only by speaking to a gentleman who had also come from Barbados around that time. He came in about 1960. And he told me that when he came to England, he came on a Monday. Somebody from the Barbados Council met them at the airport and gave them 5 shillings, and they were taken to where they would be living. And then the next morning, 4 o'clock, the transport came to take them to work for London Transport. The next day. So you come one day, and you go on to work the next day. Now, I had this idea in my mind that my parents had come to England, had a look around, go and see the House of Parliament, go and see Buckingham Palace, go and see Big Ben, and say, yes, I think we'll stay. No, it wasn't like that apparently, but they never told us that. Yeah, so you never really sort of grieve for them at all. It's only as I came to be an adult then that I get to know things, and like how difficult it was to get accommodation, and the behavior of some landlords, not all landlords. And I also got to understand those who were more friendly. For example, Irish people of Irish descent appeared or were always very friendly to West Indian people. And I never forget when I was small. My father used to work on the builders, the carpenter. So every now and again, some Irish people would come to our home. Now, one of the things that you quite quickly get to understand as you're coming along, if you speak to a person normally, it still happens now. If I meet somebody from time to time and I start a conversation, the first thing they would say to me is, I beg your pardon. Yeah? Because often they haven't taken a chance to listen to what I'm saying. They're looking at who I am first. So by the time they realize who I am, they didn't hear what I first said, so they said, I beg your pardon. Now, when this Irish gentleman used to come to our house, now that first generation who came to the UK, like my parents and them, they couldn't speak any English the whole we can speak English. Now Nyasha speaks English very well.
Thank you.
Much better than I do. So they never had any type of English accent in them at all. They were speaking exactly as they come off the boat or the plane. And my dad is going on, heavy Bajan lingo. And these Irish gentlemen are not saying I beg your pardon. And they understand every word and they're coming back. And we were sitting there like, oh gosh, how are they understanding that? So I knew from a very early age that Irish people have an affiliation with West Indian people for some reason. And of course, as time goes on, I get to understand that they suffered as well. Niggers, Irish, and dogs. Blacks, Irish, and dogs. No accommodation. So you form a little bit of a union with people who are suffering like you. And what was the question?
You know what? I'm so engrossed in what you're saying. I can't even remember. I know it's coming back to me now. Do you feel like your parents had any regrets?
Right, yeah. So I don't think they had regrets as such, but I think they often wondered because my mother left quite a good profession in Barbados as a seamstress to come to the UK. And when she came to England, she then had to do jobs like working in factory, this type of stuff. But she had a wonderful sewing machine, a singer.
Yeah.
And every now and again, she would get on the singer and make something. And eventually, when she came near to retirement, she was able to actually work for a company making some clothes. And the owner of the company turned around and said to my mom, you know something? You make things without using a pattern. But my mother never used a pattern. She just make it like that, just by looking at it and saying, I can make it. So all the people in the factory was working with pattern, and my mother could make the dress or the skirt or whatever without a pattern and without the machine, without the same regulations as the other people in the factory. So she quite enjoyed that. She quite liked that. And she always told us about people who she made clothes for in Barbados. Even some of her best friends' parents she would make clothes for. So that was something I think she missed. That and indeed, actually, my mother met my father by going from St. Andrew to St. James to learn how to do the work. And he was a St. James boy, and he was on a bicycle. And that's how they met.
Was the bicycle made for two?
I think in those days that was against the law.
Oh. Wow, thank you. So, do you feel like maybe the Caribbean might be in a different state to what it is in now if all of those people hadn't have been made to come over here?
I think without a shadow of a doubt, the Caribbean was drained of a lot of its labor. There's something about the Caribbean region, right? There's something about it. And I think the world should look at the Caribbean really more closely. When you see all these conflicts in all parts of the world, in Europe we got conflict now. You see what happened in the Middle East right now. Parts of Africa got conflict. People in Australia don't have their full rights. There's so much trouble over the whole wide world. And a lot of it comes from historic fights, historic arguments. Now, if you look at the Caribbean is a place that has seen some heinous atrocities. Heinous atrocities. Probably the first recorded genocide. Our ancestors been through 300 years of tyranny. Yet, the Caribbean will welcome anybody from any part of the world with open hands, no inhibitions, and they will give those persons respect, and natural gratitude without any preconditions. Democracy. People talk about democracy. Democracy is in the Caribbean more than in the UK. Freedom of speech is in the Caribbean more than in the UK. Those of you who might not know, one of my other interests in life is music. And I'm a Calypsonian. And a Calypsonian is the person who tells the story to the masses, who documents history in song. And the Calypsonian demonstrates freedom of speech. And politicians will not go near a Calypsonian. Police people will never go near a Calypsonian, despite the words and the songs that come out of their heads, because they are the mouthpiece of the masses, and they prevail. And as long as the Calypsonian prevails in the Caribbean, the storyteller, the original African griot, which means the storyteller, the person who documents history. This tradition came across with our ancestors and remain in the voice of the Calypsonian of the Caribbean. And that is why freedom of speech continues in the Caribbean, and that is why the history of our African heritage continues and is held in pride. I had the opportunity for the last 2 or 3 years to play for Sierra Leonean organization they held it last at the casino in Rose Kilnane. It's an annual event they have. And when I think, you think of 400 years of slavery, right? 400 years of tyranny. And when we played to start with while they're having their dinner. We played some steel band during it, so they sit down, they're having their dinner. So after they finish that, then the disco DJ man come and start to play. And when the DJ man plays, and the Sierra Leonean people from West Africa dance, they are dancing nowhere different than how we would dance. They dancing like how my parents used to dance. And I think that is a triumph that despite all we've been through, they could not take the drum out of us. The drum is there. Because if you hear the drum, we got natural talent, natural rhythm. And that is African heritage. You can't teach that to anybody. That is in you. That is in you. So when you find a baby is born, if you play music to a baby, baby will dance. It's in you. Now, ethnic cleansing, what the African slaves, people who enslaved, went through. One of the worst things that happened to African people was the banning of the drum. The banning of the drum. You were not allowed to play the drum. And the drum sent messages. You would find that carnivals all through the Caribbean are at different times of the year. And one of the reasons why it's in different times of the year is because the ban on the drums was lifted at different times in the year.
Wow.
The drum, the African drum is still within us. And as long as that is with us, our identity is still there. But people don't talk about the drum. They don't talk about the drum. They talk about the sun, the sea, and the sun in the Caribbean. But the drum is still there. Whether a person is a Christian or a non-Christian, Rastafarian, Hindu, Muslim, whatever, in the Caribbean, no matter who you are, if that drum beat, you're not going to stop yourself from dancing. You could try, but you can still get caught up.
Yeah, I can agree with that. But it's funny, I never knew that. And you hear about drums now in terms of like healing with meditation and breath work. That's a story I never knew. So, as you're a fan of music, what was your first ever record?
My first ever record. Well, the first record I can remember actually asking my mom to get for me, right, was 1968. There was an American singer I wonder if anybody here is old enough to remember this man. I hope somebody can remember him. Oh, you all look too young for me. The man's name was, God rest him, he died about 5 years ago. His name was Johnny Nash.
Oh, I know who that is. You can get it if you...
He sang a version of that.
Oh, right, okay.
But he sang his song. Yes. No, you could get it if you really want it with Desmond Dekker.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But around the same time, but Desmond Dekker had the same hit Israelites in 1968 as well.
Okay.
But before Desmond Dekker had made that hit, a gentleman by the name of Johnny Nash had a song called Hold Me Tight. And that song either went to number 1 or number 2. Now, Johnny Nash was an American, but he took a liking to Jamaican music. And that same Johnny Nash would go on to have a hit with a song called Stir It Up, which is Bob Marley's song.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't know that Bob Marley wrote that song. But if you look at the original song from 72, when Johnny Nash sang Stir It Up, if you look on the actual record, you will see in inverted commas Marley. Bob Marley was the composer. People only got to know that Bob Marley had composed that maybe after he had died. But that tune that Johnny Nash sang in 68, Hold Me Tight, I didn't like the tune so bad. I asked my mom to get it. And my mom went into Woolworth and get this tune for 2 shillings. It was on a blue label. Actually, me and Nyasha is part of Unity Live Radio. And on a Sunday evening between 9 and 11, I just play a lot of vintage Caribbean music. And I've played Johnny Nash's Hold Me Tight quite a few times. It sounds as good now as it did then. And so if it's unityliveradio.co.uk if you ever have a time to between 9 and 11 on a Sunday evening when you're just relaxing for work the next day, weekend's over. It's a great listen. It's a great listen. It's very soothing. Nothing to rah. It's just all cool stuff. It's all cool stuff.
And you get this wonderful storytelling in between. It's amazing.
Well, people say I talk too much.
Okay. Well, so just before we finish up then, is there something that you could pass on to say that was really important about the Windrush that would be beneficial for us all today?
Yes. Actually, if you want to hear a little editorial in song about the Windrush generation, go onto YouTube and put the Windrush generation by The Admiral. But that is my stage name in Calypso. The Windrush Generation by The Admiral. And you will hear my recording of a tune called The Windrush Generation, which I did in 2018. And that tune made me the Calypso monarch of London, of the UK, as I won the competition in the Notting Hill Carnival as Calypso monarch in 2018 with my composition, The Windrush Generation. So anytime you go on the chat, anytime, just go on YouTube and see it. And check the lyrics out of it, right? You could actually, the recording is on there as well as the live performance, which I've done the night to win the crown. But in terms of the importance of the Windrush generation, yes, I think history will show them as heroes who came, who made a journey. If you take, right, their ancestors were taken from Africa in captivity, taken to the Caribbean to work hard for free. This country benefited tremendously from their free labor for over 400 years. And then in the middle of the last century, the descendants of those African slaves that had worked for 400 years from now came to the UK to assist the UK after the tyranny of World War II. What a journey. What a journey. And then they came to the UK. They integrated into the UK with no preconditions. They went to churches where in some cases there was no black people there. And they were rejected from churches. But they did not give up on God. They formed their own churches as well. The children mixed in this society, no preconditions. They invited children of different cultures into their home and treated them the same way. Their children going to somebody else's home had to prove themselves. And today we still have to prove ourselves over and over and over. But despite that, we still believe in equality and justice for everybody. And that comes from our direct link to the Windrush generation who came here with good intentions and to work for what was then regarded as a mother country. Were they appreciated enough? No. Did they ask for appreciation? No. Did they ask you to say thank you? No. Because you don't look to mankind for your reward, you look for your reward from the Savior, the Lord of love.
Thank you very much.
Can you describe this event in 3 words for us?
Informative, captivating, and fulfilling.
Thank you for watching the Would You Like a Cup of Tea podcast, brought to you by My Voice in Power, Black on the Table, Bread and Biscuit Factory, and Unity Live Radio.